Well, hello and good evening, and welcome to the All Portable Discussion Zone, a biweekly live stream all about amateur radio portable ops. My name is Charlie, and the call sign is November Juliet 7 Victor. With me this evening is a special guest and friend, Chris N1CLC, who is filling in for the co-hosts that normally share a space here with me. Dan, KC7MSU, and Brian W7JET are both out with conflicts. But Chris, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me, Charlie. So this is great. I'm going to have to do the work of two co-hosts.
That's right. Right. That's exactly right. I should have got a third, but I didn't. But all right. So just to remind you, every other show, except for this one, obviously, Brian, Dan, and I will be coming to you with our own topics of interest, and we present to you and just have a little discussion. It's unlike the interview style that we normally do. So it's kind of a back and forth. Every other I guess once a month that and once a month the other thing. So also welcome to those of you who are watching live in the chat room. If you have a comment or a question, please go ahead and throw that in the chat feed, and we'll do our best to respond. How we've kind of figured out that we are going to do this is I kind of talk about my deal, and then Chris will talk about his. And while we're talking, throw those comments and questions in, and then we'll go back around and we'll catch those and address them after that. Don't forget that this is a show that's converted to a podcast and is available through most podcast players about 24 hours after the show ends. Our format. So with that, I think I'll just go ahead and dive right into what I have, and we'll let Chris go right after me. But let me share my screen here and talk a little bit about a few things. Entire screen share. Let me see if I can pull up my. There we go. We might want some audio. Okay, hopefully, there we go. All right, so today I thought I'd like to talk a little bit about 2 meters for SOTA. And so I will be doing that today, and then Chris later will have his own topic. Let me go ahead and advance the slide here because there's something else I just want to talk about first, and that is what I've been up to the last 2 or 3 weeks. As far as SOTA activations, especially, I've participated or activated 4 different peaks in the last 2 weeks. First of all, I drove up to Flagstaff area, and I met up with my good friend Herb, N7HG. He drove down from the Navajo reservation and met me halfway. We did 2 peaks. We did this one here on the right, Merriam Peak, and then he's operating 10 meters there. And then the second one, Turkey Hill South, was another great summit that we did. So we did 2 that day, both 8-pointers. And then just Friday, I went back out and I did a couple more summits. The one here with these big, huge piles of rocks is called Black Mountain, or it's called, well, it's not called anything. It's an unnamed peak. And boy, I tell you, there were a lot of rocks. I don't think I've ever hiked a summit that had more rocks on it than this one. So this is probably a one and done. And then the other one was called Black Mountain. It's a pretty enjoyable summit there. So, Chris, what about you? What have you been up to?
I've mainly been doing summits on the air. And let's see, this week, Corte Madera with a buddy of mine hiked up there. Twin Peaks, not too far from my house. Chariot Mountain was a nice, that was a good fun one. So let's see. So far this year, I've summited 33 summits. So been working hard at it.
You've been doing great.
Yeah, crazy year last year. Did 161 summits, all-time best for me.
Wow. See, I do about 65 a year. So that's incredible. that's right up there with KX0R, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to give him a run for the money. I couldn't beat him, but I think I was number 1 in California last year.
That's awesome. All right. Well, let me see. Get back to this then. I'm glad that you are a SOTA active. That's great. All right. So coming up next Saturday, it's a little bit less than a week from now. I have a special guest that we will be interviewing. Typically, we don't interview on Saturdays, but if it's somebody who we have to work around their schedule, then we go ahead and do that. So Pete Giuliano. He's the co-host for Solder Smoke podcast. Plus, he's just a well-known homebrew aficionado. He's designed all kinds of radios and built them, and he's just going to be a great interview. QRP Hall of Fame. So that'll be Saturday, April 13th at 1900 UTC. So my time is at noon. And so don't forget to tune into that. And then right after that, if you are a YouTube member or a Patreon supporter, then you can go ahead and head on over to my Discord channel, and we will be giving away this MFJ switching power supply. So, and thank you to everybody who does contribute on a regular basis. And so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about our presentation here. So 2 meter summits on the air. I thought I'd like to talk a little bit about this because I know that there are a lot of people out there who don't do it a whole lot, and there's a lot of people who I might want to do it more. But you know, using 2 meters for summits on the air has some advantages and some disadvantages, and I'd like to kind of go over them just a little bit to and then we'll take some questions after that. But again, don't forget that you should put your questions in the live chat, questions or comments, and we'll get those. And so also I have a question for you guys, and that is, what lessons have you learned using a VHF radio for summits on the air? So I'll leave that question up there. Pop that in the chat, and let's see what you guys have to say as well. Okay, so 2 meter summits on the air, or VHF. When you use 2 meters, you typically are using a handheld or an HT radio, but you don't always. You can use a base station of sorts, but typically it's a handheld 5 watts. So the advantages are less gear and more compact. What I mean by that is in reality, all you have to do to make contacts on a summit with 2 meters is to have a handheld with the antenna, like you see here in this picture. It's as simple as that. You could hold it in your hand and walk to the top of the summit. There's no extra gear. It's very light. Of course, it can become much more complex than that. KNOR, or the guy from California, what is his name? Why can't I think of his name? Ron, I think it is. He does all kinds of summiting from peaks, and he takes all kinds of big antennas, and he takes more power and amplifier. So it can get complex, but it is very simple and it's very compact in most cases. The next thing is it's less complex. When you're dealing with HF, you've got to worry about a power supply. You've got to worry more about what bands you can use, what frequencies you can play within, courtesy of the bands, which some of those things are also in play with 2 meters. But with 2 meters, typically people know how to operate a handheld radio. Most people who can just plug in the frequency or dial the frequency. All you do is key up and you can make a contact. It's very easy to do. You don't have to worry about extra antennas. You can just take something right out of the box and go operate with it. Again, you can become more complex with it, but really it's very simple. Another advantage is if you are a technician class licensed, then you can participate in summits on the air. And 2 things. One, this is how summits on the air first began back over in Europe, in England, in I don't know, it's probably 25, 30 years ago now. Is they didn't start doing summits on the air with HF. It was mostly VHF handhelds. Evolved into HF, and of course it evolved into a great program. But it's a technician class license here in the United States can easily do that, and you can get your start without purchasing a lot of gear. I don't know if you really wanted to, for $26-30, you could buy a Baofeng and you could start activating summits on the air. So it's not that expensive to get going, but there are a bunch of limitations when you look at 2 meters that you'll need to consider. First of all, it's short distance. And what I mean by short distance is you're usually not going to get hundreds of miles away from your location in order to make a contact. Most of the time, typical contacts on simplex is going to be 50 to 100 miles, and usually closer to 50 miles. So you're closer in. You're not making very long distance contacts. It is possible to make longer contacts, but typically you won't. Also, it's a line of sight, so you're not relying on the ionosphere to carry your signal. There are occasions where you can use propagation for 2 meters, some a tropospheric ducting or some sort of you can bounce the signals off the clouds sometimes. There's certain rare events that do take place, but for the most part, when you're communicating, you're communicating line of sight. And what that means then is that if you have an obstruction in the way, like a mountain range, then you are going to have a lot of difficulty in getting those contacts that you need for your activation. A third thing is there are fewer contacts available, and it's just kind of just by reason and deduction, you know that there's going to be fewer contacts because of several things. One, if it's shorter distance, then you're not going to be able to have as big a coverage area. Therefore, less people live within the area that you are going to be in. And also, a lot of people don't really do 2 meters for summits on the air. And a third thing is, if you're not in a populated or dense area, like a metro area, like Phoenix Metro or Dallas or DC or something like that, then if you're out in the boonies, then you may not be able to reach that pool of people, that conglomerate of people that can make a contact. You can make a contact with. So you need to consider those disadvantages when you are operating 2 meters. So I'm just going to go through real quick some of the items that I've thought about and give you some examples here of some good things that you might consider when you are operating 2 meters, if you want to do that. So the first thing is mountain ranges. So if you are, so for example, right here on the bottom picture here, you can see there's a couple of mountains there. This is on the opposite side of Flagstaff, or in other words, this is north over the mountain from Flagstaff. And so it would be extremely difficult for me to make 2 meter contacts with people who are in Flagstaff. And in fact, this area that you're looking at here on the bottom picture, I don't think that I could muster up a single VHF or 2 meter contact at all, because it's such a remote area. It's possible I might catch somebody who's on the road, maybe if I try the national calling frequency, but those mountain ranges, they can really cause a problem. There's a mountain called Needle Mountain out east of me, and it's notorious for not being able to make any 2 meter contacts. I've tried I've activated it, I think, twice. The first time, no contacts. The second time, I think I mustered 1 maybe or 2, and it was very difficult copy. Okay, so the next thing is population density. When we're doing mini morning madness, we call it, when we're up on a summit here in Phoenix Metro, there's hike to the top of a little peak that's completely surrounded by blacktop roads, and it's a big city like the city of Phoenix. You are almost guaranteed to get some contacts. The population density is such that you will be able to do that. And that's opposite of what you see here in this remote area. So you really need to be able to know your location, and when you activate a summit, what you're going to get out of it. So another thing is, I was in Wyoming. I'm from Wyoming. I was up on Rendezvous Ridgeline. There's a summit up there. It's an unnamed summit on Rendezvous Ridgeline. It's just above Jackson Hole. I tried to make contacts. I finally got, I think, 1 or 2 2-meter contacts, and it's just because in Wyoming and Idaho, right there in that area, even though there are population pockets, the popularity of 2 meters and just the density is such that you won't get a lot of people who want to participate in summits on the air. Okay, so the next thing is just a short little mention. I've been on probably recently, just in the last year, probably 2 or 3 summits where I've had to be reminded to change my polarity of my I was holding a Yagi, actually, but same thing works if you are holding a transceiver. If you are holding it upright, the antenna is pointing up. But there are a couple people who chase me all the time in Phoenix who have big Yagi antennas that are horizontal antennas, 2-meter horizontal antennas. They use them to chase DX, sometimes 2-meter DX. And so if I'm on a summit and I'm talking to somebody like this, and they have, where my antenna is pointing up, and they have a horizontal antenna, sometimes you can still make that contact, but I always struggle, and I'm reminded Tom and N7AMA always reminds me. He says, "Turn your antenna, turn 90 degrees, turn 90 degrees." And it's amazing. I can hear it scratchy something in there with my radio like this, and I turn it 90 degrees, and there he is. He's like a 5'9". So remember that polarity plays a role, and if you have a Yagi, then sometimes you'll have to turn it 90 degrees in order to. In fact, what I usually do is I do a sweep with a Yagi, and then I also turn it and do a sweep as well. So polarity is an important part of 2 meters. Next thing is propagation. I made a contact with Adam, K6ARK, several years ago now. into California from way east of me. It was 328-mile contact. And so I don't think that that was purely line of sight connection. I think that we had some propagation, and I was surprised actually. I relatively recently learned, maybe in the last few years, that actually 2 meters does use propagation of sorts. And I always thought that it didn't even exist with 2 meters. It was always just line of sight. But I think that there was some sort of ducting involved in that contact. Next is this picture here on the top. You can see all these commercial antennas. There's a bunch of them up there. You need to be aware, if you're going on a summit, you can get some really bad RF interference depending on the summit that you do. This one in particular, it's notorious for the interference. And there's a mountain here in South Phoenix called South Mountain. That the actual peak is called Suapoa, and it's also notorious for you not being able to make any 2 meter contacts whatsoever. HF, no problem. You can set up your HF antenna. You can work your stations, be fine. But 2 meters, sometimes you'll be calling and calling and calling, and you won't hear anybody. The problem is that they hear you, because the interference is on your end. It's interfering with your receiver. And so a trick that we've learned that's pretty common is to make sure that you don't use a gain antenna near commercial antennas or commercial communication systems. And the reason you don't use a gain antenna is because the gain antenna will capture all of that interference, and it'll overload your front end of your radio. So if you're on a summit where you know you're going to have this interference thing, just use a regular rubber duck. And you could also use a filter. You can put a filter in line, and that also helps. But you'll see a night and day difference. I was calling CQ, and somebody called me on the phone. Why aren't you replying to all of us? We're all talking to you. And I'm like, well, I can't hear anybody. And then this is my friend Pete says, well, what are you using? I said, I'm using a Slim Jim up about 30 feet in the air. And he said, well, just you go to the rubber duck and let's see what happens. And sure enough, rubber duck, I made all the contacts. So really interesting. Next thing is the time of day. And it's not necessarily so much a thing about the radio as it is about human behavior. If you want to get up at 5 a.m. and make contacts, you're gonna anybody else who is up at 5 o'clock will make those contacts with you. But you got to consider the fact that if you to maximize your opportunity to make contacts, you'll want to be more into the 8-9 o'clock hour when people are up and moving around. In fact, that's when rush hour is. You might be able to catch people commuting to and from work, unless it's a weekend. Next is the equipment quality. I was on top of a summit just recently called 2-Bit Peak. I had with me a Yaesu 60R, and I also had with me a Radioddity GS5B. And I was using the Radioddity GS5B, and I had a friend with me also, and he had a commercial antenna that was a higher quality, and a commercial radio that was a higher quality radio. And he was, I heard him receive a signal, but I didn't hear it on my Radioddity GS5B, and I was like, wait, what's going on there? And so I decided to run some tests, and I found out that using the same exact antenna, standing in the same exact position, trying to communicate with the same exact person, I said, are you there? And then I let go of the unkeyed for the GS5B, didn't hear him come back. Then I turned on the FT817, did the same thing, changed the antenna out, same thing, and he came back clear. And so the only difference was the radio itself, and everything else, to my knowledge, was the same. And so just the quality of the radio sometimes, and then that receive can get you a little bit more and get you maybe a contact you might not otherwise not get. So, and I think it was just the receiver on the GS5B wasn't as high quality, and so because this was on top of a summit where there was absolutely no interference, there was no antennas, there was definitely not intermod or anything like that going on. So, the quality of your equipment can make a difference, and so the next thing is a mismatch in the gain or power. And what I mean by mismatch is between two people who are trying to communicate. So for 10-Point Madness, it's an event we have here in Arizona. We do it once a year in October, first weekend in October. I typically like to bring with me a 75-watt radio and a Yagi a gain antenna that I put up about 25 feet and mount. So that's pretty good. So I found it was really interesting. I was calling CQ and kind of the same thing happened. A friend of mine called and says, "Hey, people are calling you back. What's going on?" And the problem was a mismatch in gain and power. I had 75 watts and I had quite a bit of gain. On the other end, the people who were trying to reach me and call back to me, handheld 5 watts and a rubber duck. So what's interesting is that I couldn't hear them because they weren't putting out enough signal, both gain wise and power wise, and so there was a mismatch there. That goes both ways. You sometimes can make that happen, but sometimes it's if you are not as powerful as far as your gain goes or your power, then you're not going to be able to make a contact. So keep that in mind when you're on top of a summit with a handheld, a 5 watter, and you have a duck. Somebody far away from you, they may have a great station and you may be able to hear them, but they may not be able to hear you. This kind of goes both ways. So let's see. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide here. I just wanted to give you a video example of what I'm talking about. And this video example is from Friday. And let's see if I can bring this up from Friday. Let me see. Hopefully you can hear the audio. If you can't, then I'm sorry, but let's give it a try. Give me a thumbs up, Chris, if you can hear it as I start playing it. CQ, 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 CQ SOTA, CQ SOTA, November, Juliet 7, Victor, NJ7V calling CQ from Mike November 076. CQ SOTA, CQ SOTA, CQ SOTA, November, Juliet 7, Victor, NJ7V on Black Mountain near Wickenburg. CQ SOTA, CQ SOTA. I think Phoenix is kind of this way. CQ, 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 CQ SOTA, November, Juliet 7, Victor calling CQ. Alpha Alpha 7, Papa Sierra, you're 5-9. Alpha Alpha 7, Papa Sierra, 5-9, 5-9, 59. Alpha Alpha 7, Papa Sierra, Alpha Alpha 7, Papa Sierra, 5-9, 5-9, 59, 5-9. Oh, where'd he go? CQ. Okay, so you can see, or you could hear actually from that, see or hear from that last video that somebody tried to get a hold of me, but but then all of a sudden that contact was broke because I didn't hear them, and I don't think they heard me either. It was his name is Paul. He's from Phoenix, and what's interesting is I actually emailed him and I said, "Hey, Paul, what were you using? Because I heard you." And his reply, I'll read it here off my phone. It's an email to him. He says, "I was inside a building on the 6th floor in downtown Phoenix with a 5-watt HT and an aftermarket duck." So and I had on my end a 5-watt radio with a Yagi. He said, "I heard you fairly well, and then nothing. So somehow I dropped off." And he said, then the phone rang shortly thereafter, so I couldn't move around much looking for a clearer path. And so this is an example of line of sight. And even just a little bit of movement sometimes will cause a 2-meter communication to be broken. So we couldn't make this contact. It wasn't just because of the phone call. It was because somehow either I moved slightly or he moved slightly. Maybe we were pointing right between the gap of a V and a mountain. I don't know what the deal was, but there's so many just variations. And so especially with 2 meters, it helps to move around and to get to a higher point or a different point. And I do know that there was a mountain range in the way, but so I was lucky to get him because he was on the 6th floor of a building. And I looked at the line of sight. There's a calculator you can use to see that. And I could see that I did make a path right into him, but between a couple of mountains. So that was pretty cool. So, but that's an example of 2-meter contact not working. And so let me just move on here to the end. So with that, I'm going to pause here real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Chris, and I'm going to take a look at your comments and questions and see if we can get those lined up. So after Chris is done, then we'll look at what you guys have to say. Let me load up here Chris's question, and that is: Have you ever failed to properly plan a route for Summits on the Air activities? So with that, I'm going to leave that up there, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Well, so before you do, Charlie,
Yeah.
question for you. Didn't you say that standing directly beneath those commercial towers sometimes help you because it's propagating out over you, or is that not true?
I didn't. Did I say that?
I thought you did, as you know, like last year or something.
Yes. I had a video where, yeah, that was on that same Soapoa. Yes. If you are directly under it, yes, for sure. I don't know that it helps you, but if you go directly under it, there's not enough interference with your antenna because there's so much gain pointing outward that it
Right.
It does, yeah.
Right. Yeah, you can always try that if you're having a hard time.
Right. Get right under there.
Of course, I learned some from your presentation here, but if you want to get some 2-meter contacts and those go to the mountains that overlook the LA basin. Oh my gosh, you'll have a pile up that'll take you at least a half hour to work down. It's crazy.
I absolutely agree. In fact, what is it called? What's it?
Tahquitz. I think you went up to Tahquitz. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't put the radio down. There were so many people all over in that area. Yep.
Yeah, huge pileups on that one. So cool. I did prepare some slides for this as well, so let me present those. And for people that want to see the slides directly, let me start the presentation first. Hang on. Okay. Come on. I'm pressing the oh, here it goes. It's working on it.
All right. Well,
so I'm sharing the slides. If you go to hamninja.com/navigation, you'll get to my slides. I also put a link to it on the Ham Ninja homepage, which is hamninja.com. And it'll just put you on to N1CLC.com. And you'll see the first one there.
I don't see anything yet, Chris.
It's hanging up here, Charlie. So give me 1 second. Oh man.
All right. That's all right.
Everything.
Well, while you're looking at that, let me just go and maybe grab a couple of these comments, and then we'll give you a chance here. So we got. Let's see here. Let me pull up one more thing. Myself, it's like. There we go. All right, I got to bring the screen back up here. There we go. All right, so we've got Patrick. He just says, hello, good evening, everybody. And then we have Adam, K6ARK is there. He says, good afternoon. And then he says, an AR for the eclipse and hanging with family. There we go. But we'll catch the full show in Team Replay. There you go. Thank you so much. All right, so you got the wrong screen, I think. Or do you? You got the right screen or the wrong?
My browser crashed. So
okay.
Wow, this is really not wanting to do it. So
well,
hey, you know what you could do, Charlie? And my browser might crash again, and I'll come right back. Is go ahead and bring up the presentation on your side. Go to hamninja.com.
Yeah,
/navigation, and if you wouldn't mind running that slide.
Yeah, we could do that.
Oh, wait a minute. Maybe it went through. Are you seeing it now?
I'm not able to add it, but hold on. I can see it. Yep, there it is.
All right. Cool. Finally. Okay. So as I said, these slides are on hamninja.com/navigation. And there'll be some extra bonus stuff on there as well. So what I'm going to run through today is just kind of how I do navigation planning for Summits on the Air. Is a lot of fun. And yes, I have failed to properly plan. And my summit activation that day just was no bueno, partially because I couldn't get to it because of private property. And there is many of these mapping programs have a private property layer. And I basically ended up in Chaparral and I had to bail on it. It was pretty bad. So we're going to go through, we'll do a quick run through of finding your summit, how to do some research, and then we'll chart the route and the reasons for doing that. We'll do a quick review before we head out. I'll download those offline maps and we'll navigate to the start, have fun, leave no trace, and all that good stuff. And the example app that I'm using today is Gaia GPS or Gaia GPS. I did a review on that and All Trails. Both of those are great. CalTopo makes a great navigation application that you can run on your phone, download maps for offline and stuff. So with that, the first thing to do, obviously, is you want to go out to Sotless or SOTA Maps and find the summit you want to go to. Pick the one you want. There is a way to download all of the summits in a particular area as waypoints onto your charting application. So you can go into sotamaps.org and download a whole bunch of summits. So I have tons of summits in California, New Mexico, and Arizona downloaded into Sotless. So I'll show you that in just a minute. So you'll want to do some research. On the previous slide, you saw a count, an activation count. I'm going to just use this one summit, which is Grapevine right here. And you want to look and see if there's any previous activators. If it says 0 and it's anywhere near K6ARK and it hasn't been activated, then you know it's really hard.
There you go.
Yeah, you're going to need gear and the whole thing. And I'm not equipped to use gear, but yeah, so you want to look at that. You want to check and see if there's any public access. So you'll use your charting application to bring up a private property layer. When you're at home, for sure, those layers may take a little bit longer to load. And then you'll want to pick a route, a way to get there on the chart. And we're going to look at that. You may see charted route paths to get there. There may be roads that you can drive right up to it, or you may have to bushwhack. And what you'll have to do is use your experience in reading topo maps and just build as best you can. So I've done that, charted a route out to it. And then, when you get there, sometimes it might change. So you'll definitely want to use trails whenever possible, because you don't want to tear up the mountain and cause more problems, erosion and those sorts of things. You can use various overlays. The one that comes with Gaia GPS is pretty good, but you can also overlay US Forest Service, etc. The other thing that I've done in the past is reached out to other activators that have done the summit that you wanted to do. For this one, and there was one even in Arizona, I reached out and somebody generally will respond within 5 minutes. I mean, these SOTA guys are super helpful, but they'll come back and say, oh yeah, not only is this how I did it, this is where you park, and here, let me send you my track, just follow that and you'll have no problems. So there's a lot of great resources via charting, but also click on the summit, figure out who else has been there and pop them an email. There's the community is super helpful. So you'll want to figure that out. And then of course you'll want to maybe chart out how you get to the start. So let me take you through. This is a screenshot from Gaia GPS, gaia.gps.com is how you'll get there. And I'll have a link to that in the presentation at the very end. So the first thing I drop in is my initial approach fix, which your other host will get a kick out of because that's a flying term. I used to do a lot of flying, but that's initial approach fix, IAF, and that's generally parking. So the cool thing is now I know where to park. And then even if there's a trail, I'll map it, chart it out using the application. I'll download other people's tracks. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about why you want to chart it out yourself. So this orange line, hopefully you can see that here, is what I actually charted out. So the green line is a friend of mine. I contacted him. He said, oh yeah, this is how I got up there. And actually the green line is me. The blue line is my buddy. He said you can follow that, but he didn't recommend, he recommended maybe going up a little bit farther and then cutting over. So that's why you see my orange line going up across here on the chart. And so that's how I charted it out. But I had everything on my phone, and we'll talk about downloading those maps. And so it's a nice thing that when I get up there, start looking around, I know that a friend of mine was able to make it using the blue line. So I basically got up there, got close, and then I knew that I could always go to the blue line if I had any issues. This country was pretty rugged. So up to this little final approach fix here was all trail. It's a PCT, but then I went ahead and I figured, okay, this is how I'm going to cut over. I decided to cut over a little bit early, which is a good thing because I mistakenly put this at a, if you read the chart, it's pretty darn steep the way it's charted here. And then got up there. This is really important for a couple of reasons. If you're going to be in it, certainly if you're bushwhacking, you want to have some preparation in advance. And also allows you to get back to your vehicle, right? You want to know where you park so you can get home for dinner. So what I've done here, there's a couple screenshots here. I've charted, the one on the left is my example here, I believe. This is Grapevine on the left. And one of the benefits of charting this stuff, even if it's a trail all the way to the top, is you get this little elevation profile here. So you can see the profile. There's some really steep areas here. Looks like I'm going in about 3 miles in or a couple miles in. There's kind of a steep area. This is probably right where I leave the trail. That's right here. And it goes up. But more importantly, this is a much better example on the right-hand side, which is over in New Mexico, just over the Arizona border. Black Bull Peak that I did with Dale, A70Y up there in Alpine. I've got a place near Alpine, Arizona. And if you had just looked at the chart, the parking right here, between here and the summit, it's only a rise of 300 feet. If you just look at the pure difference. But if you chart it and then show this elevation profile, you get a big surprise. And certainly you could see some of this when you look at the chart. You can see that you have to go downhill to go back uphill, but you don't realize the extent of how steep this is. So coming right out of the car, we go straight down to the bottom of this canyon, and then you have to crawl back up out of it. So it's not a 300-foot gain. It's more, there's about 1,000-foot gain from here to here, and then you got another probably 300 feet here. So just to get back up to the elevation of the car is pretty darn steep. This was really helpful just to kind of acclimate yourself to what you're getting into. It also kind of raises the antenna of, hey, if it rains, you want to be careful with flash flooding and that sort of thing, which turned out that Dale and I got hammered with a really good thunderstorm that came right over us and just sparked all around us. It's pretty crazy, but luckily no flooding on the way back. So that's one of the really big advantages of charting, even if you're not going to, even if you have what looks like a trail, you get the elevation part. The other advantage you get is sometimes you get in an area and it has a charted trail, but you can't find it. In fact, it may no longer really be there because it's overgrown or it's just kind of wasted away. And it's kind of turned into a use trail. So it's still very handy. It gives you a tool to figure out how to get on what used to be a trail and get back out and get up to your destination. Clearly, I don't think I have an overlay here for private property, but you can bring up a private property chart to show you.
That's for premium members.
Yeah. And you definitely want to have that. There's several tools that let you do that. AllTrail, I think, has one. Guide GPS, Caltopa has one. But yeah, it helps you stay off not only private property, but also reservation property, unless you have permission to be on a reservation, a permit, what have you. That's super important to get out there. And that's the source of one of my failed activations. Another one was, another one was, I didn't look at the profile, and what I realized about 3/4 of the way into the hike was I was going to try to have to go up a cliff, and that was absolutely not going to work.
No.
So, and of course, you know how the thunderstorms move in Arizona, so I had to head back before they came in. Eventually got up to that one another day. So that's your review to be able to kind of go in and do some planning, which is part of the fun of doing summits on the air, kind of doing some planning and what have you. I don't know what you think about that, Charlie.
Yeah, it is part of the fun, especially when it's a summit like the last two I did just on Friday. I'd never been to either one of those, and so I planned those a little bit more than I might something that I've been up several times, and it was fun. It was to explore and to go in places that you haven't been and to encounter things that you didn't expect, and it's a good time.
Yeah, it's fun. It's super handy. The tools that we have today are just awesome. I mean, it used to be just you had to get the paper charts out and chart plotters and all kinds of stuff. Now you just bring it up on your PC. You have Google Earth. You have overhead views. You have all kinds of. That's the other tool that you can use if you can't find a charted trail. Sometimes you can find a road that's not even charted. It goes right to the summit. So use everything at your disposal to try to figure out how to get up there using a road or trail or some kind of cut. You'll see cut trails that just aren't charted. So super, super handy. The next most handy part of this is, of course, your phone. And my step 5 here is to download those charts so they're available offline. Because certainly in remote areas in Arizona, you're familiar with this, you don't have any cell phone access. So if you don't have the charts downloaded onto your phone, you're going to see the lines, but you're not going to see any terrain or anything else, which is definitely, I mean, having the lines there would be helpful, but you want to make sure you have those there. I made a mistake and didn't do that. I was going up a Greens Peak over in the Mount Lemmon area, and I didn't download. And I got up there and it's like, oh, geez, but I had researched enough to know how to head up. And then once I got to elevation, then it started downloading the chart. But you definitely want to do that. The other thing is I want to mention, I should put something in here, is you also want to print the charts out. If you're going into an area where you may be a little bit more remote, you may be doing some bushwhacking, print out some charts, because you can drop your phone and that'll just going to be a really bad day. It'll hit a rock.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be dead. Your batteries will go dead. You don't want to be out there depending just on the navigation device in your hand, whether it's a phone or any other device. If you're going to be in a very remote area, especially if you're going to be like bushwhacking or stuff. The other thing that I'll do sometimes is maybe I don't need charts, but I'll get out there and I'll get to a point that I know is maybe halfway between my summit and where the car is, because that's the most important thing, is I'd be able to get back to the car. And then just jot down what is the bearing to the vehicle from that point. So I know I can get to this particular point. Maybe it's a good overlook that I know I can get to from the summit. And I'll know for sure that all I have to do is steer, say, 180 from there to get back to the car, for example. So just be aware of where you're at. I'm a little bit more sensitive to that because, as I told my favorite search and rescue guy, if you ever get a call out on me, it'll probably be because I'm lost or I jammed another tree in the back of my leg. So one or the other. Well, maybe I'll do a safety presentation next time. So download offline maps. I have a little picture here in the chart in front of you that shows you just bring up the track that you want to download the offline charts for. All Trails works the same way. When you download the maps for offline use, what it'll do is download chart segments that include that track or route that you have charted, and a little bit on each side. So you have all those tiles downloaded. You can certainly add, there's ways to add more on these applications, but at least you'll have all of those portions. And typically it's more than enough for me to use. Certainly these are zoomed out quite a bit, but you'll have plenty of topographic information for your trip on here. So that'll be really handy. So of course, the next thing to do is to get out there and get cracking. And the way you do that, I do that, is one of the reasons why I always drop a pin for the parking lot is so that I can drive. Where am I going to drive to? In most of these apps, you can click on the waypoint and say, give me driving directions in your, using your phone. So you get in the car, I bring it up, hit the driving directions, and then it brings up either Google or the Apple Maps or whatever charting app you want. And boom, I can drive out and navigate out to wherever that is the fastest way possible. That's super handy, of course, to get out to where this whole thing's going to start. The other thing that I want to bring up, I have a little arrow to it here, is when I clicked on that little point, my initial approach fix, which is where I want to park, I've had people call me and say, hey, I want to do this summit. In fact, just a couple of days ago, somebody called me and they were in San Diego and they said, hey, how do I get to this one? I said, here, let me give you the latitude and longitude of where to park your car. And right there where you park, that I'm going to give you, you cut and paste this into Google Maps or whatever else, and it'll bring you right out to the parking lot or wherever I'm telling you to park, which is right here. So I've got that. You just cut and paste that number. You can give it to your friends who are going to meet you out there, or you can share it with other friends and say, hey, just go out here. There's a trail starts right there, and you're good to go. So that's also another handy thing of having all this stuff charted ahead of time. And of course, I've been doing this for several years now, since 2017. So I have tons of, local summits, where to park, tracks and routes on how to get there that I can share with my friends. So one other tip that you probably want to do once you get cracking is to turn on tracking. You want to do that for a couple of reasons. If you've never done the summit, is sometimes you don't follow the exact way that you charted your track or someone else's. And so once you get to the summit, you know that there's definitely how to get back. Maybe it's not the best way. I never want to do that again. Or it's like, hey, I may take the shortcut, or I know for sure how to get back because I can just follow the tracks that my little GPS tracking device laid down. And that can be super handy, especially when you've been bushwhacking. And of course, the sun is moving across the sky. Everything looks different as the day changes and you turn around. I've been flying and, turn around flying the other direction at a different time of day, and everything just looks different. So it'll help you kind of stay on track, and it provides a way for you to know that, hey, if I got here using that route, I can definitely get back using that route. I've tried to take a different route. I mean, there was one time I did that, and it's like, you know what, this is not going to work. I need to join up with the track that I laid down on my GPS. I see you're nodding your head there, Red. You've probably done the same thing. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, sometimes the descent isn't as easy as you thought it would be. So I had actually that experience a few weeks ago, just south of Tucson. It was crazy. It took me longer to get down than to get up. So that's a whole nother story. So that's in using Gaia GPS. We've gone through pretty much all the steps that I follow. Certainly not that hard. It's fun to do a little prep. And the last slide for your reference here is the presentation. Again, here is at hamninja.com/navigation. I did a review of Gaia and AllTrails and why I chose Gaia. But again, I also brought in CalTopo. I think the problem with CalTopo at the time I did the review, they didn't have the app for the iPhone, so that kind of fell out of favor there. It is pretty sticky now for me. Let's say somebody else comes out with a much better navigation app. All of my past trips are all in Gaia, so it's easy for me to just reach in there and grab one, certainly when I get back out. There's a safety article you might want to read out there on safety. Maybe that's another presentation. Also, the hamninja.com YouTube channel you can get to that by going to hamninja.com/videos. You start to see a theme here with hamninja.com. So love to have you as a subscriber. I have a video series that I'm working on. Hope you don't mind me plugging this, Red.
Do it.
I'm going to be reviewing a whole bunch of different radios that I've used for Summits on the Air, and I'm going to reach out to some of my friends to maybe review their radios as well if I don't have that one, or they're not brave enough to let me borrow it to take on the mountain, because I'm going to bring those out. It's not going to be a technical review. It's going to be a hands-on review. It's like, hey, why do I like this thing? Why is it good for SOTA? What do I like and don't like? So it's less geeky from that perspective, and it's all about portable radio. And if you're new to Summits on the Air, I did a multi-part series on how to activate and how to chase and some other stuff at hamninja.com/SOTA360. And yeah, you can check that out as well, or not.
Cool. All right. Well done, Chris. I'm going to take your slide down now, and if you don't mind, and we'll just look at your pretty face.
Yeah.
So for you guys listening, we've got about 10 minutes left, which is good. Question again is, have you ever failed to properly plan a route for Summits on the Air? Drop your answer in the chat. We'll go ahead and get some of these comments and questions in chat here in just a minute. But I wanted to say, Chris, that a few things about your presentation that I like. One is that your endorsement of Gaia. I, for a while, didn't quite know where to settle, but I've been using Gaia for a while, and I absolutely second your opinion about Gaia, how functional it is, how well it works on your phone, and I just like everything about it. It's easy to download your tracks and put them up there. So that's definitely one thing. And the other thing is your emphasis on the route finding, and how it may not turn out the way you are, but you got to make sure you have a pin for your truck. Just Friday, I didn't put a pin where my truck was, and all the way down, I'm like, now, was my truck there or there? Was my truck there or there? And I finally decided, and I guessed right. But if I hadn't, I'd be actually putting some more mileage on my feet, which I didn't want to do.
Yeah, when you're on the mountains and you're kind of tired, and sometimes you're not thinking real straight. You're really just thinking about that beer, and you got to get back to the car first.
Yep, for sure. All right, so let's see. Do you have anything you wanted to say about the 2 meter stuff before we pop in and start getting some stuff going?
No, I mean, I've had 160-mile QSO. That was no problem. I think the one thing I learned from it was, wow, how far you can go on 2 meter with just a little handheld is amazing.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun to get out there and play 2 meter.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right. Well, so the first answer here is from Scout 25, Scout 75, better known as Shane. Thanks for being here, Shane. He says, one of my first activations, I winged it by memory from what I read in the SOTA sites. Instead of hiking up a logging trail, I hiked up somebody's cabin driveway. Okay, that's funny. And then Douglas says, my last UHF VHF activation read was my last contact. Oh, well, there you go. That's awesome. All right, let's see. We've got Keith Stevens says, I want an HT that does 2 meter 440 CW mode. Yeah, I was reading the comments earlier, and you were asking about what's a good radio that does that, and there were a few answers in there. I think there was. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, the FT857, the 81718, the ICOM 700, the IC706, 99, the FT991A, and so forth. But you were like, hey, yeah, that's true. But I wanted to find one that's a handheld that does that. And boy, would that be fun to have that to have a 2 meter CW handheld. That would be great. Okay, so let's see. We go on up here a little bit more. There was a comment about Google Earth, and he said it's great for zooming in on forest roads and whatnot, and I agree with that. And I recommended FatMap. I really like FatMap because you can. I think it's the better of any so far. It's the best 3D imaged a map that I can find, and you can turn it all different ways and figure out the profile of a mountain and maybe which route you want to take up, which ridge line. So I really like FatMap, but you definitely Google Earth is one to play with as well. Jeff says peak bagger for potential routes and notes, which I don't know. You didn't mention that, right? Did you mention peak bagger?
I did not. One of the things about using like Google Maps is if you can bring down a satellite overlay in something like Gaia GPS and you see that cut trail or something, you can chart it. I've done that in the past and give you an option, because some summits all do multiple options. And because that overlay is right there, it lets you drop little pins along the way.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I see you do something on Gaia, I learn something new. The whole you just copy that what is it? That pin, the satellite coordinates. That's what it is. You just copy that and share that. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that was there. All right. So again, Shane says planning routes on Gaia GPS is almost as much fun for me as the hike and activations themselves. He says he's a dork like that. Yeah. And then
it really is. It's a lot of fun.
It is fun. It is fun. Uber Geek says I need to do an 11-meter SOTA. Yeah. Wouldn't that be interesting? You get all the truckers, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I think that's about it here. I did get one early from Adam K6ARK. He said he made a CW 2-meter contact over a path where SSB wasn't possible. I think that's what generated the whole discussion about what radio can I do 2-meter CW on, and it is pretty cool to use 2-meter SSB and 2-meter CW. Most of us are using FM. And that's kind of the standard, but I've tried SSB. SSB sounds great. The sound of SSB on 2 meters is just amazing. And you can get further in some instances with SSB than you can with FM. And then, of course, if you're using 2-meter CW, I've had much better success with that than any other mode when you have the capability, of course. So,
what about satellite, Charlie?
Satellite? I've never made a satellite contact. How about that?
You know, I haven't either. I've been with another ham, K6ARK, that built a really cool antenna for doing satellite communications with 2-meter, 70 centimeter, and got a whole bunch of contacts from a summit. So that's another opportunity to use your 2-meter rig.
Yeah, there you go. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up. One more here. WA7JNJ says I may have hiked to a different mountain north of Mount Erie when starting from the Mount Erie lower parking lot. That's his answer to the. No, I've never hiked to the wrong summit before. I think
Dale and I almost did. You know, sometimes the Forest Service labels the wrong mountain, or labels a different mountain than where the actual SOTA summit is. So you want to be careful with that as well.
That's so true. In fact, especially when I was out with Herb out on the Navajo reservation, and he was trying to take me along. Matthews Peak. We were going to go to Matthews Peak. We ended up driving, and he's like, I know the way. And we kind of drove, and we got to this point where there was an antenna. And he says, this is Matthews Peak. And I says, but the pin says it's like 2 miles from here. And Matthews Peak, where the tower is not where Matthews Peak, the highest point in the mountain is. Same thing for the second one, Yale Mountain. And so, definitely make sure you go to the pin. Not something else.
So another good example, Charlie, is using these GPS apps for something like Mount Baldy in Arizona, which is the second highest peak. You and I did that. It helps you stay off the reservation land, but they also have the pin off the actual summit so that you don't accidentally go onto the reservation.
Right.
I don't know whether they did that intentionally or what, to keep the SOTA operators off the reservation land. So that's another reason.
Yep, good point. Okay, so we're about done here, Chris. Let's just wrap this up. We'll say our goodbyes and all that. But what do you have coming up on your channel? Anything? You did mention those.
Yeah. So I'm going to be reviewing a whole bunch of different radios and how they work for SOTA, kind of like you did for the paddles. And then I have a really good episode you want to miss that will be on outerwear for Summits on the Air. I think you'll find that very interesting.
Very cool. All right. So coming up for me, I have purchased this, which is it's K9DP's filter, AM filter. For HF, and I put it together. and I had made a little short on how I put it together. My next video is going to be, for this anyway, using this, is going to be to test this in the field and see if it can filter out AM broadcast on a radio. I also have that Black Mountain activation that I showed you the video earlier, and I mentioned it a couple times here. That video is going to come out this week with the whole, using CW and FM and all that. Also, the next paddle in my series, Chris mentioned the series that I have, the American Morris Mini B. I'm going to be reviewing that. And then lastly, 4 days in May, let me show you this real quick, and then we'll let you guys go. Share screen, entire screen right here. There's a YouTube channel here. 4 days in May archives. And so I am the social media person for QRP Amateur Radio Club International. 4 days in May is coming up in another month or so. And these are the archives, the presentations from 4 days in May previously. So this YouTube channel, I'm going to start using a little bit more, especially during Dayton, during the Hamvention. I'm going to be posting a lot of content here, a lot more than there has been. So if you're interested in that YouTube channel, you might, if you like, homebrew and building and stuff like that, this might be right up your alley. I'll try to get some content up there on that as well. So I think that's it for me. All right, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today, for being a great host, or a great co-host. I think I'd like to invite you back sometime whenever Dan and Brian skip out again. I think it'd be fun to have you on again as kind of a regular fill-in if you're available.
Yeah, would love to sometime.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, and I'll be seeing you hopefully down here in Arizona at some point when you head over to Alpine. Maybe he'll up with you there, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Charlie. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Bye, everybody. We'll catch you next time. See you later.